Changing the definition of marriage and legitimizing same-sex unions would work against the socially vital goal to support and strengthen marriage between one man and one woman, as it has always been understood.
Any attempt to preclude or prevent gay, lesbian, and bisexual individuals or couples from parenting based solely on their sexual orientation is not in the best interest of children.
The lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, commonly called the LGBT social movement, is an ongoing social movement with roots as far back as 1969 that is characterized by the non-heterosexuals of society's involvement in the declaration of LGBT pride, the civil protest of what they believe is a withholding of rights by the government, and this social group overall impact on the American society.
The LGBT movement is arguably one of the most controversial issues in the modern American society due to its massive involvement with government, religion, media, and morality.
Earlier in the program, 2 statements about marriage and family were given as an example of the arguments behind the current social issue of gay marriage, which is one of the subtopics greatly involving members of the LGBT community.
The Catholic Church, a major anti-homosexual player, views any other relationship except those of a man and woman as non-traditional. To them, in order to give the LGBT community a right to marry, the definition of marriage must be changed. This change is not something that the Catholic Church favors in any way. They do not hate the non-heterosexuals, but they want them to celebrate and not marry.
Those who do not support the Catholic viewpoint are usually people who support the LGBT movement and the people involved. They believe that the non-heterosexuals should have as much rights as any other person. They believe that the gays should be allowed to marry from the same sex and should be allowed to have any jobs that they could have had before they left the closet.
Very few places welcomed gay people in the 1950s to the 1960s. In the 1960s, being homosexual was illegal in every state except Illinois. The FBI kept record of the homosexuals and where they enjoyed to go and even their friends. The U.S. Postal Office kept tracks of addresses that had anything to do with the homosexuals. The police commonly did raids on gay bars, and any bars that had anything to do with a known homosexual was shut down and their customers arrested, and the newspaper would expose them. Thousands of gay men and women were publicly humiliated or even put into mental hospitals. A place that has a high population of homosexual was New York, and it was also a place that was most aggressive in trying to stop the homosexuals. In 1966, more than 100 men were arrested each week for homosexual solicitation. The homosexuals were done with being in the closet. They were ready to get out, and it started in a little place called Greenwich Village in New York.
Greenwich Village was where most homosexuals would hang out. Greenwich Village had many places for them to hang out and get to know each other. A place that became popular was the Stonewall Inn. The Stonewall Inn was a symbolic place because in the beginning it was called Bonnie's Stonewall. Lesbians were welcomed using coded messages to get in. It survived the raiding and became a restaurant. Then a fire destroyed it until it was repainted and became known as the Stonewall Inn for homosexuals. The Stonewall Inn was one of the places that was popular with the lower part of the town, such as the poor. The homosexuals never actually resisted the police trying to stop them from meeting other homosexuals. But on June 28, 1969, the table was reversed. The police was trying to raid the Stonewall Inn, but they lost control and attracted the attention of people who enjoyed encouraging others to riot, and they started to fight back for their rights.
Within 2 months, 2 gay activist groups were formed. June 28, 1970 was the first time a gay pride march happened. It took place in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. It was commemorating the anniversary of the riots. Now gay pride events are mostly held throughout the world near the end of June to remember the Stonewall riot.
In 1993, the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy came into effect. It restrained the U.S. military from any attempt to uncover if any of its members were not heterosexuals, but it allowed them to prevent those who were openly heterosexual from being a part of the service. Many say that the law itself suggests that non-heterosexuals are not even supposed to be in the U.S. military in the first place. Numerous government personnel have beliefs of why non-heterosexuals should be banned from the military. There have been different accounts of non-heterosexual service members committing sodomy on new trainee soldiers, and crimes of child molestation. Others simply believe that non-heterosexuals bear the threat to the order, conduct, and discipline of the U.S. military. In the words of Dick Cheney, remember why we have a military. The reason is to be prepared to fight and win wars. That is our basic fundamental mission. The military is not a social welfare agency and it is not a jobs program. We aren't there to run social experiments. We are there to fight and win wars.
Professor, how do you feel about the don't ask, don't tell policy?
The order says that as long as you gays act as though we people don't know who you are, we will act as though you don't exist, and thus in our willing ignorance recommit ourselves to viewing your status as loathsome and repulsive. It treats gays as less than human, less than animal, less than even a vegetable. It treats gays as a reeking scum, the breath of death, and it promotes hypocrisy, requires lies, sets snares, blames the victim when they're snared, and causes unhappiness.
In the opinion of the American public, most Americans believe that non-heterosexuals who openly show their orientation should be able to serve in the military. In February 2010 national poll, 66% of Americans answered that the don't ask, don't tell policy was discrimination against non-heterosexuals. Also, in another poll from the same year in December, had 77% of Americans believed that non-heterosexuals should be able to join the military openly. When it comes to military personnel, there are more who are not in favor of non-heterosexuals being in the military than those who are in favor. 37% of military personnel do not believe in the service of non-heterosexuals, while 26% were in favor and another 37% did not have an opinion. The personnel who did have non-heterosexuals in their unit, 6% said they had a positive impact, 66% said they had a no impact, and 28% that said they had a negative impact. Overall, the don't ask, don't tell policy has affected an abundant number of military personnel. It has discharged over 13,300 personnel over a span of 15 years.
In November of 2007, the House of Representatives passed a bill that the gay, lesbian, and bisexual community had been fighting for over 30 years. The Employment Non-Discrimination Act bans job discrimination against gays, lesbians, and bisexuals, but not transgendered people. This is an ongoing occurrence when it comes to the LGBT community. The transgender population is often left out or overlooked in bills and compromises involving non-heterosexuals. Eventually, it was settled, and the bill was revised, stated that no matter one's sexual orientation, they cannot be discriminated against in the workplace. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi stated that she felt a narrow bill would build momentum for further advances on gender identity rights and the rights of all Americans.
Today, the LGBT movement has gained popularity among those directly affected and those who are not. Every June, hundreds of thousands of people gather for LGBT Pride Month, which has been officially declared by 2 different presidents. This is celebrated with thousands of LGBT Pride parades throughout the country. In June of 2009, President Obama issued the proclamation that June 2009 was to be known as Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Pride Month. During his speech, he stated, LGBT Americans have made and continue to make great and lasting contributions that continue to strengthen the fabric of American society. The LGBT rights movement has achieved great progress, but there is more work to be done. During LGBT Pride Month, I shall call upon the LGBT community, the Congress, and the American people to work together to promote rights for all regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity.
The LGBT movement today is impacted by many subtopics of American society today, and none more than the many stereotypes about gays, lesbians, bisexuals, and transgender people. These stereotypes can be considered one of the driving forces in opposition of the movement in society as a whole. There are many LGBT stereotypes floating around that come from mass media, parents, peers, teachers, and leaders in society. Some tend to be insulting, some are just flat out wrong, and some even contribute to the development of irrational fears of non-heterosexuals. Some of the many stereotypes include gay men act as if they are feminine, while lesbians act as if they are masculine, which is not always true. LGBT couples cannot have children and cannot get married, which is also not actually true. Non-heterosexual couples are more susceptible to HIV or AIDS, which is not true in any way. People can be made gay. This one tends to be controversial. One side say that one is born with his or her specific sexual orientation, The other side says that some are born with a choice to what their sexual orientation will develop into, and some are not born with that choice.
LGBT has made its way into many of our social institutions and has actually been affecting our lawmaking process. You have to realize this whole movement has been officially recognized. It's quite obviously a very powerful movement. Everyone is worried about it in some way. Schools, churches, and government itself even are. Even though the entire movement is regarded as a joke, with everything from nicknames being passed around like nothing to full-out public attacks against them, has made the entire movement into more than a social movement. It has turned it into more of a social phenomenon. Not only is there the LGBT movement, there's actually an anti-LGBT movement. That's a completely different idea, though.
This social movement is still an ongoing force in today's American society. This creates the questions, where will the LGBT movement, social movement, go next? And what will it amount to over time? Like many of the major social movements of the past, this one may end with one particular party succeeding in the end. It may very well end up being that gay marriage will be recognized as a federal institution someday, or maybe it will be outlawed as illegal bonding altogether someday. Maybe someday the protesting will end, but more likely as humans there will always be those few who do not accept any sort of change, including homo, bi, transphobics, and will prevent this movement from moving forward and succeeding in being accepted fully by the American society. There is no telling how powerful and influential this social movement may become in our society's future. All of this information directs the social movement towards an unknown future that may hold virtually any result. In our society today, we hear about gay marriage, protests, and violence against the LGBT population constantly and consistently in our media. We as citizens interact with this population on a daily basis in the workplace, at school, and out in public settings. Our government is deeply involved in many LGBT social issues, and religious organizations have taken their stand in society. We, the people, are left up to a choice on where we stand on this social movement.